to another episode of the History of the Bay podcast, sponsored by the good people of Amoeba Music San Francisco, the folks at Dying Breed San Francisco, STEM Social, and got to shout out the folks from HP Farms, keeping us laced with that good product. Also got to shout out my folks Mojo Labs for collaborating with me on this official tissue History of the Bay snapback. I hope you got yours before it sold out. Behind the lens, we got King Said. On the boards, we got DEO, and today we have another special guest, a staple of not only Bay Area hip-hop, but hip-hop worldwide. Not only hip-hop, but political commentary, labor organizing, films, directing, screenwriting, all types of cool stuff that we're going to learn about today. And I'm talking about the one and only Boost Riley of the Coup.
All right, what's up?
Thank you for coming through, bro.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Of course. There's a lot of titles, a lot of descriptors to talk about what things you've done. Some people call you an activist. Is that a word that you use personally?
No, I mean, I think, no, I don't. I don't use it for myself. One term kind of makes you feel like somebody just looking to be active or whatever without a strategy. But secondly, I don't even do the stuff that people would be saying is activism anymore. You know, I lend my voice to things when I can, but I mainly have been doing my art. And for me, it's always been a struggle. So at times I would have called myself an organizer, right? But even for that, it was always a struggle, like, you know, both things, whether it was music or film or organizing, they take up so much of your time that I'm either doing one or the other. And there's been times when, you know, I quit organizing to do music, and then I quit music to do organizing, and then quit again. Quit organizing to do music again, back and forth, just because it takes so much time. Like, you know, when I decided to do music the first time, when I decided to take it seriously, like, you know, because everybody is like, oh, I'm going to make a demo. I'm about to go make a demo or whatever. You say that sort of thing. But when I was like, okay, you know, this is something that could be used, was actually when I was in an organization called International Committee Against Racism, which was part of Progressive Labor Party. And I already rapped, but I didn't take myself seriously. And we were doing some organizing in Double Rock projects. And we go to door to door, and every week we go there, and it was really like not a pointed campaign. It would be like, fight racism, fight police brutality. And it wouldn't really be around one particular thing. I think there was a couple campaigns that we were talking about, but we just be there every weekend. And one Sunday we got there, and a lot of stuff was in shambles. And there were a lot of people telling stories about what had happened the night before. And so whenever you got like 40 people telling the same story, you're going to have wild variances of what happened. But what I'll tell you right now is what everybody agreed on. Like the thing that everybody said that was consistent in all the stories, which was there was this woman that lived in Double Rock with two twin 8-year-old sons. Her name was Rossi Hawkins. And her twin 8-year-old sons, one of them started getting harassed by the police there. They were saying he was selling dope. And they were messing with him, and his twin brother came. And so the police started beating down these 8-year-old kids, like slamming them against the door, all this type of stuff. The neighborhood came out. People saw this happening, came out to stop it. And, you know, at some point, the police got scared when a whole bunch of people came and they were trying to pull the the kids away, and one of the police shot up in the air. And, you know, if you've been around a gun going off, you know, usually you're not, the only thing you're thinking is get out of there. So the whole crowd dispersed. Everybody ran away, leaving the cops with the kids. But at some point, everybody turned back around. And by the end of the night, the police car was turned over and the police ran out of there on their feet. And they got the kids away and took them to the hospital. Because at the time, right before that, there had been a dude that had been beat up by the police, and the police drove him around in the car all night until he died, just so that they wouldn't get him to the hospital in time. So people were afraid that was going to happen to these kids. So they had turned around. So everybody told me this story. But the one thing that everybody said was there was one thing that turned everybody, when everybody ran from the shot and everybody turned, there was one thing that turned everybody back around and run to get those kids. And it was because this was the summer of 1989. And the biggest song to us in the world, and definitely biggest on the radio at the time, was Public Enemy, Fight the Power. And so what was said is that somebody started saying, fight the power, fight the power, fight the power. And that everybody got chills and started saying it. And right then, they knew that they all needed to go back. It was like a rallying cry that swept through all of them. And when I heard that story, I was like, I realized what music could do. And that's when I said, okay, I'm gonna actually do this for real. And at the time, I was, I think it was then, no, a little bit later, I was working at UPS and saved up money. I actually started taking it seriously. I started coming here to the Fillmore. And this dude, J Mac, had a studio. And it'd be these little junior high schoolers coming there, named JT the Bigger Figure, San Quinn, who else would be up in there? Forte would be up in there, and all that. And J-Mac would be making everybody's beats, and you might bring him a record or whatever, or he's just got all these records. And that was the first studio that I was in. It was like above his father's liquor store on Divisadero. I think Huey MC would be over there, all that. And by then, Huey MC was already like, oh, that's he had a song out and all that, right? So it's like, oh, this is something real. And so I saved up my money from UPS. J-Mac had made this beat, went to the studio. J-Mac didn't show up, and I had to make a beat, even though I didn't know what I was doing. And from then on, I was taking it serious.
Wow. Well, that's an interesting journey from where that question took you. And I was asking because to go back to the question of activism, I like how you answered that because I feel like that's a term that gets kind of thrown around and people don't really know what it means. And because I have a lot of community background myself, and I was kind of, after a certain point, I kind of started seeing that there was something, not to like talk shit or anything, but like some kind of attention grabbing or attention seeking maybe about being like, I'm an activist. Mm-hmm. Whereas the people I was learning from were more using words like you said, organizing. Mm-hmm. Organizing a protest, organizing a strike.
Or a campaign, a full campaign.
Yeah. Whereas activism, not to knock it, but is more, I don't know, what's the word? Isn't there a word like performative or like theatrical or kind of like bringing attention to
and I don't think there's a right or a wrong word. It's just there are associations with it that just have to do with simply the protest.
Yeah.
Someone going protest to protest. And the organizations I was involved in, we were always about figuring out how to gain power.
Yeah.
And so that had to do with various campaigns we were in, organizing on the job, sometimes in schools, but around being able to withhold labor and cause actual shift in power.
For sure. And I think the other thing that was interesting that you said is like that organizing and music don't necessarily go hand in hand, because to do one, you kind of need to put all your focus into.
Now, that's just me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Some people are different. Like, for instance, writing has always been something that has taken a lot of focus from me. And maybe that's also just the kind of songs that I like, right? Like, I don't like, when I write something, I don't really like say, okay, I got this one good line that could go at the end of the verse. And so I just got to get from this one good line at the beginning to the end. Like, I'm trying to make every line good. So, and I'm not saying that's even the right way to do it, because some people are different and it just flows for them. And me, it's always been me writing and reworking and all that. But I there's people like, I see freestyle and they freestyle their whole thing. And I'm like, okay, if I could do that, I could probably do both. But I'm just not that way.
Yeah, I mean, I just tend to agree that when you put a solitary focus on something, it might be the best way to get it done, even though there are people that can do both.
Well, yeah. And also, besides even making the stuff, most of it is organizing the business of it, getting it out there, right? Yeah. So, I mean, I spent, 1,000 more times on the phone in my career than in the studio. Right?
Yeah.
So, so all of that takes a lot of time, and
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm right there with you. And my experience is more coming out of youth programs and doing after school education, or like working in schools or ethnic studies. I got a background in that. I got a degree from San Francisco State in that. So that's where I was focused on. But then recently I'm more focusing on my craft, and this is feeling more like my calling and what I got to do. I've been a little burnt out by the community scene to a degree, unfortunately. But one reason I'm glad you're here is because no matter what role you're playing or what you're focusing your time on, you've been consistently vocal and outspoken about the things that you believe in.
Yeah, well, I mean, because that's the reason for me making the art in the first place, right? So, like, I'm lucky. Artistically, I'm lucky to have a passion, because I always feel like that's the thing that guides the decisions I'm making, the artistic decisions. If it was like just to show that I'm raw, I think I would be lost. Like, I don't really know what that is. That's changing every month and every day and all that. But what I do, my reason for wanting to make music or film or TV is about how the piece of art I'm doing can be used by a movement to help change things. So to me, it's not like I have to focus on that. It's because that's the only reason I want to do art in the first place.
Got you.
STEM Social. Throughout my day, I'm handling business. I start my day with a workout, post some content, write some emails, bust some plays, make some music, make some art, and then I record podcasts at night. How do I have all this energy? STEM Social's 5 Mushroom Complex. This is a healthy, all-natural, all-organic vitamin supplement that can increase your immune support, cognitive enhancement, and overall vitality. It's powered by 5 different mushrooms that have been used in traditional medicine for centuries, like turkey tail, reishi, cordyceps, chaga, and lion's mane mushrooms. If you're interested in trying STEM Social's 5 Mushroom Complex, check out stemsocial.io or go to the links in the description.
In today's climate in 2024, what do you think is the most important political issue people should be paying attention to?
Well, here's the thing, is that obviously the biggest thing on many people's minds right now is the genocide that's going on in Gaza right now. And to the certain extent I know it's also not really shown to people that much as well. But for a lot of people, the U.S. funding, the killing of so far 40-something thousand people. Okay. The U.S. killing of so far 40-something thousand people. U.S. supplying the bombs and the ammunition for Israel's killing of 40-something thousand people in Palestine, and the ongoing occupation. That's what's happening. One of the things that's happening right now. So a lot of people are focused on it. And unfortunately, it's making a lot of people feel powerless because, we see millions of people around the world saying, fuck this, we don't want this. And I think it's obvious that very few people want it. And that's not stopping it, right? And same thing that happened over the last 20 years with the war in Iraq. Like, millions of people around the world were out in the streets saying, we don't want this. But the reason why we feel powerless is because sometimes even folks that are organizing, folks that are on the left, give a wrong idea of how power works, right? We've been telling people sometimes, like, just lift your voice, just use your voice, say your truth, and truth to power, we'll say, things like that. But the reality is, under capitalism, the people with the capital are who has the power, the ruling class. And how they have the capital is through the exploitation of labor, through the billions of people that work for them, and through them making a profit off the difference of what they pay you versus the value created by that labor. So if we want to exercise power right now, while we're under the system, what it would take is a general strike. What it would take, and even before you got to the point of having a general strike, which ostensibly would shut everything down, and you could then hold profit hostage, right? And say, look, nothing moves until this policy happens, that policy happens, this policy happens. Now, the truth is, we're not there yet because we haven't been organizing around those things. Some of it has been because we've been just saying, just organizing protest to protest. But it's a place that we can get to. There is a lot. Over the last 3.5 years, there's been 3,000 strikes and work stoppages in the United States. It's the biggest strike wave we've had in the United States since the 70s. And it's growing. Whereas, where people are looking for where their power is, how to even affect even local policy changes, not to mention national and international policy. So I think, that's the next big wave. We saw what got reported right after George Floyd during the Black Lives Matter were the protests and the expressions of outrage. What didn't get, talked about were those 3,000 strikes and work stoppages, many of which were happening during that time about that sort of thing. In the Midwest, for instance, a bunch of people that worked at restaurants said, we don't want the police served here. And they shut down the restaurant and did that. Now, that was the thing that they were asking for. That's what they wanted. They won it through doing that. And that might be seen as little, but it's the thing that they wanted and they got and they were able to do it through the withholding of labor. There were bigger things that happened that were not as connected to Black Lives Matter, but during COVID, when everybody thought that people needed respirators, the Boeing airline workers, they went on strike and they demanded, they were like, we don't want to make jet airplanes anymore. We want to make respirators. You know, you had things like that happening all over the place. You had stuff more recently like Oakland teachers and LA teachers and Chicago teachers who went on strike and said, you know what, we're not just asking for higher wages. They won that and they stayed out on strike. And they said, we want showers and shelter for the students that go here that are homeless. We want control of the budget for the teachers and the parents. And that's what they won. At least they won that for portions of the budget. And so we're seeing radical things happen from people figuring out how to take power where they are. And that's connected to some of the bigger things that are happening. And there's a way that we can look at things where we feel powerless, like there's nothing I could do. I think a lot of times people won't pay attention to it because you feel like nothing I could do about it, right? And that feeling is connected to a reality, right? But I think that just has to do with strategically how we are organizing. And once we start organizing, what I think we need, which is a mass militant radical labor movement that uses the withholding of labor as a strategy and tactic to make policy changes and build toward a larger revolutionary movement. Once we start that, then people will start feeling their power.
I'm glad that you answered that question. I posed a question to you about what problem is going on, and your answer mostly involved the solution, which I think is missing in a lot of this discussion. I do want to use this platform to say I am disturbed and disappointed and outraged by what's happening to Palestinian people right now. I haven't been as vocal about this issue as I have been in the past, partly because of what you've been talking about, that feeling of powerlessness. But I do feel like that there is a shift coming because these images are hard to ignore. And I feel like what we're seeing right now is a younger generation of people being motivated to action by just the sheer inhumanity of what they're seeing on social media, which is providing an alternative where mainstream media is ignoring the problem.
Yeah. I mean, to get rid of apartheid in South Africa, some of the things that happened are things that we could utilize here, which was the boycott, divestment, and sanctions. The reason why that works, because normally you might hear me talking about the idea that boycotts are usually thrown out there as an answer to strikes and are not as effective. In this case, when it's coupled with divestment movements where they are getting large organizations such as universities or other corporations to divest from a country, that actually was very effective with South Africa. But the other thing that happened during that time, you had longshore workers, specifically here in the Bay Area, as well as other places, that said, we're not unloading any ships from South Africa, and we're not loading anything that goes to South Africa, right? And then you had other factory workers, like I think there was a 3M factory, maybe it's 4M, I forget the name of it, but where you had solidarity strikes between somebody goes on strike in South Africa and a company that's related to that, business chain of distribution also went on strike here. So you had all those things happening to get rid of just the policy of apartheid. I'm not saying everything is, great in South Africa now, but they don't have apartheid, and that was done through a movement, and that sort of thing can happen here. And right now, what would need to happen is something that could force divestment, and that would be strikes.
Yeah, well, like I said, I like that this conversation is focused on outcomes and objectives as opposed to just, I mean, as much as important it is to educate people on what the problem is, you kind of have to follow that up with, okay, well, what do we do about it? And I think those are pretty realistic objectives.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only way I like to think about things is like, you know, seeing a problem and figuring out what there is that's been done and what could, you know.
Absolutely. And not to pivot from the subject because it is really important, but we usually follow a timeline on this podcast. And I think it fits in because from what I understand, your education and your background in some of these political movements starts with your parents and your grandparents even, correct?
I don't know about my grandparents. I mean,
okay.
So my mother, my father's black, my mother is black and Jewish. Her uncle her uncle fought Nazis, like the actual Nazis, in Germany in the street, like Antifa style, but without the mask, because that was just this. Before they rose to power, and so when they got into power, he was one of the first groups of folks that were like, okay, you better get out of here quick. And you know, he was a communist, and that was the movement that was happening then. That still should be happening, but it was very big at the time. You just had the Soviet Union at the time, just had their revolution. People were amped up around the world about people gaining power. You had China building toward a revolution at the time. So you had those things. Then on my father's side, my father, when he was 12, he joined the NAACP youth organization. And later on, as an older teenager, was part of NAACP and CORE. And then he ended up, that was in North Carolina. And then he ended up in San Francisco and was part of the San Francisco State strike that helped to create the first School of Ethnic Studies right there at San Francisco State. That's where him and my mother met. And he was also part of more radical organizations, Progressive Labor Party. And then they moved him to Chicago, where I was born. Then they moved to Detroit almost immediately after, and then back to Oakland by the time I was 6. Interesting.
So what was it like for you moving from the Midwest to Oakland?
Yeah, I mean, I'm 53 now. I was 6. So, I mean, I remember snow there. You know, we had snow and we had, you know, what was interesting, my older brother and his friends, they used to sit around doing ham bone. I can't do it. But they would be rapping against each other, right? They didn't call it rapping, but they'd be, just, capping on each other, right? Doing that, boom, boom, boom. And it'd be to rhymes. And so when Sugar Hill Gang came out, there was somebody else from the Midwest. I remember we were right on East 18th in Park. And I remember, went to Franklin Elementary. I remember this kid, we heard somebody playing music out of the car, and he turned to me and said, "They're playing a Hambone song on the radio." That was a Sugar Hill Gang. So we knew, that whole idea that rap started in New York at this time and blah, 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 because they put the chocolate in the peanut butter. Whenever hip hop came around to every place black folks was at, nobody said, "What is this newfangled contraption?" It was something that already existed. you know, it just wasn't a hit song on the radio, but we also know we had, it was a hit song in the 60s, Pygmy Markham, Here Come the Judge. Sounds just like, that was 1965 or something like that. Sounds just like Sugar Hill Gang. But, so, that's what I remember about that. You know, I went, I just remember, I remember right before we moved from Detroit, my neighbor's mother was like, yeah, you're going to have a good time in California. Every house has a pool. Everybody has a pool. I was like, really? They were like, yeah, everybody has a pool in California. Anyway, so that got quickly corrected in my brain.
Yeah, I didn't grow up with anybody who had a pool.
And so yeah, that's what I remember about that. And yeah, I remember there was a dude at that same bus stop that I'm remembering. There was a dude who picked up a envelope. A kid, he picked up an envelope. I wasn't there when it happened, but he picked up an envelope off the ground, just like seeing something, picked it up like, ooh, what is this? And it was a bomb, and it blew his arm off. And ever since then, like, it was always like, you never pick up anything off the ground. You don't know what it could be. And I never really, I had kind of forgotten that, but I always thought that as a kid. Like, why am I thinking that? Like, you don't, like, and then I remembered about that bomb thing.
Yeah, that's many.
This episode of History of the Bay is brought to you by TPP in partnership with Lost Soul Courier Collective. Last year, over 800 people in San Francisco died from drug overdoses. This is a serious problem that affects our entire community. I've personally lost several friends to overdoses, and many of us know people who have been impacted. We need to come together to support our loved ones who are at risk of overdosing. If you're around people who are using, remember to carry naloxone. And if you are in need of naloxone, you can get free delivery in San Francisco from Lost Souls Courier Collective by calling or texting 415-275-1922. For more information, contact Tracy H415 on Instagram or visit lostsoulcouriercollective.org. You can also get the links in the description of the episode.
So, I mean, this is Oakland in the late 70s, 80s.
Late 70s, yeah.
And what was Oakland like growing up in those times?
You know, it's hard to describe what it is except for what it isn't. I don't know. You know, okay, I think one aspect of what it could be is encapsulated in this one story that I sometimes tell. When I was 8, so first I went to Franklin Elementary, then I went to Hoover Elementary, then I got into this magnet school called Kaiser. And we were living right across the street from San Antonio Park. And at the time, San Antonio Park, that was where all the lowriders were. And they also had this band that was from Oakland that made records called ESO, East Side Oakland. And it was like mainly, Chicano music, like a lot of congas and, and kind of trying to sound like war or something like that. But they were like, oh, ESO is here. And they would be playing there in the park every weekend. So I remember that. But so I would catch the bus to school and back. And one day catching the bus from Kaiser back home, I forgot to get my transfer. You catch the bus down the hill from it's like where Claremont Hotel is. And then you transfer on like Ashby and Telegraph. And forgot my transfer. I was like, okay, I'll go on the bus and say I lost my transfer. I'm 8 years old. I'm like, I'm a cute kid. They're going to let me on. And the thing that I realized, because this was something, what happened stayed so much on my mind that over the years I found out other stuff that was happening at the time that explains what happens next, is that there were all these news stories that said, you can't trust these kids. They wouldn't say black kids even, but there's kids running scams, 3-card Molly, this and that. They're trying to They're trying to get you for this, trying to get you for that, blah, blah, blah. So there were all these news stories about the scams that the kids in Oakland were running, right? So I go on there, and it's a black bus driver, and he says, "You can't scam a scammer. Get off the bus." So I get off, wait for the next bus, another 15 minutes, get on. 3 buses, they don't let me on. So I start walking home because I don't know what to do. I didn't know my phone number. There's no cell phones. This is way before that. And I think it was even before they even taught us like 911. And I didn't have the politics I have now. So as I'm walking, I'm stopping at every bus stop. Hopefully, because I knew the route. If people know Oakland, walking from Telegraph and Ashby to San Antonio Park, that's a long, no adult would want to take that walk, right? So, but I'm like, this is my only way. So I'm walking, and I only know the bus route. I'm sure there was a quicker way. So I'm walking down Telegraph toward Oakland, keep stopping. And at a certain point, I see a cop. And, like I said, I didn't have the politic I have now. I said, "Hey, I know where I live, but I lost my transfer and I can't get home. Can you take me home?" The cop was like, "We're not a cab service," right? And so, okay, keep walking. And I get home. It's like 10:30 at night. By the time I make it home, and my father is, it's a bunch of people outside. My father's like crying, and and it was right then. At the time, it just didn't occur to me, because I had been protected. You know what I'm saying? Like none of this stuff occurred to me. And right then is when I realized, because my mother would always be like, "You're cute, you're beautiful, this and that," right? So I was like, "Oh, I'm not cute, I'm black," right? Like, that's why they wouldn't pick me. They don't see the cute little 8-year-old kid. They saw this kid that was the scammer that the news had been talking about. So that's a long way to say the same shit that's going on now with the way the police, with the way the press and the police are demonizing young black folks in the Bay Area was the same thing that was going on then, right? And and right now we have that same thing. We have whole, and if you study, every area has a few Instagram pages, maybe it's TikTok too, I don't know, that are dedicated to supposedly talking about how bad crime is in the area, right? And I'm not saying things don't happen. People are getting bit, blah, 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 but it's not more than it used to be. It's not more overall crime. It's definitely not more violent crime than it used to be. The facts are there. But what they've done is figured out a way to blame poverty on the impoverished, right? Like, and that's basically what was going on then. Same thing,
Interesting, man. Yeah, when I listen to some of your music, especially the earlier stuff from the Coup, it's breaks down a lot of these Oakland type experiences that you might hear in the other Oakland rap songs, but in a more analytical way, I would say, and almost in the way you told this story here. So it's not surprising that those types of experiences, even something like losing your bus transfer, kind of helped shape your political perspective, or social perspective.
Definitely.
But you actually just became active as an organizer in high school, right?
Yeah.
So how did that come about?
So like I said, my father had been involved in radical politics, and by the time I was like 14, he wasn't at that time. But he still had friends that were. So I remember I was at some barbecue, and somebody came up who I now know was a youth organizer, and said, hey, you should come be involved in our youth group. We'll come by and pick you up on Saturday. And back then, again, the beauty of no cell phones, you could just not be home. And, so I could say, yeah. And in my mind, I was saying, yeah, come through. And I was not planning on being there, right? And, but I forgot about it. So I was there. And like I said, 14, a dude pulls up. And he's got a van full of 14-year-old girls. And he's like, hey, you want to come to the beach with us? And I'm like, hell yeah. And he's like, but first we're going to stop and support the Watsonville cannery workers strike. So I got in the van because we were going to do the Watsonville cannery workers strike and go to Santa Cruz. But when I got in that van, the girls that were in that van, they were talking about current events, things that were on the news, things that I had been like trying to block out, mainly because of that sense of powerlessness. Like, what do I need to know this for? Can't do anything about it, right? But they were involved in an organization that talked about changing those things. So they were interested in knowing those things. And I was just like, it kind of blew my mind, like the things that, they were talking about music too. I remember it was like, I forget what was out at the time, but, but the fact that they were talking about these things and had a sense of what was going on, that blew my mind. Then we went and passed out flyers at the Watsonville cannery workers strike, and it was an interesting thing going on. I ended up going week after week after that, but what was happening at the time was in Watsonville, there had always been like a few groups. There had been Mexican folks, Portuguese folks, and Filipino folks. And had a lot of conflict between the communities, and a lot of people trying to, like a church trying to have a multiracial thing, harmony sort of thing. None of that was working. People were fighting each other, all that kind of stuff. And what had happened up until this particular strike was, sometimes the Mexican workers would go on strike and the Filipino and Portuguese workers wouldn't. Sometimes Filipino workers would go on strike and the Mexican and Portuguese workers wouldn't. And it would always lose, obviously. And so this time they were all out on strike together. And there was a sense of, we got to hold this shit together. And we got to figure out how to work out our differences, not because, that's the right thing to do, which it is, but mainly because we have a material thing we can get from this. And again, I was only there at that point, but I only know what they were saying was the difference. The difference was that even everybody's kids and teenagers came together and saw that this is something they can get from this unity, right? And so that right there taught me a lot. And I was hyped. And they then had that same organization, Progressive Labor Party International Committee Against Racism. They had a summer project in Delano, McFarland, and Watsonville. Delano, McFarland, and Wasco, down by Fresno, all that. And where we would go and we would be there for the folks that worked in the fields. These were organizers, these were revolutionaries who had come up from Mexico and to help build a revolution. And they got jobs in the fields to organize a union there. So they were organizing the thing called the Anti-Racist Farm Workers Union, which was an answer to, some of them had been in Cesar Chavez's union, but Cesar Chavez's union at the time was very against undocumented workers. They were actually deporting undocumented workers working, and they've self-criticized themselves or whatever, so I won't get too much. But anyway, this organization came out of people leaving that organization due to those policies and wanting to organize not only documented, but undocumented workers as well. So they would be getting up at 3 a.m. and being like, and to those of us that came to the summer project would be like, okay, we need flyers for when we get off work. We need a caravan. We need a skit, that talks about the pesticides that are happening and, what, and building a union. It'll be stuff like that. Or it'll be like, we need people to figure out what the caravan route is going to be for the parade tomorrow. And so just basically learning by fire, but the trial by fire. But the thing is that I saw people who were not only figuring out, okay, how could we have a union where we're doing, but they were connecting it to a larger revolutionary movement that they wanted to do. So definitely those years, by the time I was 15, I was a committed revolutionary. And those years being involved with that, like really shaped what I was doing, because going to that summer project right before I went there, as I'd been doing stuff in Watsonville, they'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, now, you should pass out flyers at your school. I was like, what? Like, the ideas were one thing, but standing in front of my own school, like when, the idea of doing anything uncool, so me going up to people being like, oh yeah, you should check this thing out. Like that was something I was not going to do. And they couldn't, I went to the summer project and I was able to kind of do that where I didn't have that social investment anymore. And so then I came back, and that's when really kind of put what I learned into action.
Wow, that's a hell of a journey, bro. And from there we have, just to skip ahead a little bit, you're staying with this organization, you're learning from actual labor organizers literally in the field.
Yeah.
And that leads you to organizing in Double Rock, which leads you to hip hop.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that clean of a line, because there's also stuff like during, like they'd be like, okay, do a skit or whatever, And then I also had my boy, Johnny, who went by the rap name Julius T. Poet. He was a rapper and I wasn't. And he would, he was trying to get a record deal with MC Ant's label. And MC Ant was performing at what was called Keisha's Inn then. It's a bookstore now. It's on San Pablo. And but it was the place before that, it was Ruthie's Inn, then it became Keisha's Inn. And every Friday, MC Ant would play and would do a show. And then they'd have like 4 openers. But so if you could go, they made Johnny a deal. If he carried records for a month in and helped set up, then he could perform once before MC Ant. And so, of course, he talked me into helping him so that he could do that. And at the same time, I was trying to get him to come to police brutality rallies. So I would be like, kind of, pumping him up like, man, you got to come to this rally. We're doing it in front of the police station, and it's going to be a lot of people there, dude. You could just do a rap against the police, and it's a show, basically. You could do it. And he'd be like, and really, it was back then, there was only 8 people going to be at the thing, and he'd be like, I'll do it if you're my hype man. And so then I would be being his hype man so that I could get him to come be involved in these anti-police brutality rallies. And so all of that was going on,
When did you meet E-Roc?
When I was working at UPS. Working at UPS, and E-Roc, actually Spice One was there at the time too.
At UPS?
Yeah. Spice One.
In the city?
Huh?
In the city?
No, in Oakland. We worked At the Oakland at the airport.
Okay.
Yeah, and we would be in the bellies of the planes, like just sneaking, trying to figure out how to not work. And we'd be in the bellies of the planes, just pounding on the table, and I'm pounding on the sides of the planes and just rapping. And matter of fact, that's also part of the story because, like I said, I had gone to the studio and ended up having to make my own little thing. And at the same time, I went and spoke at this rally at UC Berkeley, and this dude comes out of the audience, and he's like, "I'm Too Short's DJ." It was this dude Pizo, the beat fixer, Pierre James, and he was like, "Man, do you rap?" Like, I wasn't even rapping at the rally. He was like, "Do you rap? Because that political shit that really sells right now." And I was like, "Matter of fact, I do." And he was like, "Good, because I got an album I'm putting together. You ever heard of Spice One?" I was like, "Yeah, I work with him." And so, like, at the same time, we ended up coming out with this compilation album that was me, Spice One. Well, at the time, I think it was just one called 187 Fact, and who's now Mopreme, but at the time was called Mercedes, and Tupac's brother, and that was called Dope Like a Pound or a Key on Wax That Ass Records, and it was put out on In a Minute through In a Minute, and what's funny is that I hadn't told my father that I was rapping, and we were at the gas station, and somebody pulls up and they're playing my song. And my father's like, that dude, that sounds like you. And I was like, yeah, because it is me or whatever. But the thing is, I didn't say my name on anything. And Spice One's like, 187 the fact, 187 the fact, all over the whole album. So everybody thought I was part of 187 Fact. And yeah. And then so that was that was the first thing that came out. And work that I met E-Roc there. And matter of fact, I'm getting the dates. Yeah, the first time I went to the studio, that was while I was working at UPS, because that's how E-Roc came in the mix, is that I needed a ride to the studio. And E-Roc had the car. And I was like, dude, you should just come rap with me. I need a ride. But, I was very clear. I need a ride to the studio. And I'm using my money to get studio time. But on the way there, I was like, it'd be better as a group. You know what I'm saying? And you should rap. He was like, all right.
Wow. Was he politically minded like you, or was that?
I mean, I would say this. I say that everybody, anything that you believe about the world is your politics.
Right.
Right? So I don't think he was impassioned about the same things that I was impassioned about. He, was down with what I was talking about.
So calling the group the Coup was your idea?
Yeah. That was that. I had the name, and I didn't really know what a coup was. Like, it wasn't like we had, I knew that it would be like there was a coup. I thought a coup was the same as a revolution, right?
Right.
I thought it was just another word for it, but I didn't realize that it was just from a small military junta sort of thing. But once I realized what it was and we already had the name, I was just like, well, okay, it's sort of ironic because what we talk about is about a mass movement and building to a revolution that is the revolution of the working class. So that's where that happened right then. And it's, that was maybe our first thing came out in 91. And then a little bit later, we put out so what happened, we hear the song out, and, my father's a lawyer. So he was like, are you getting paid for this? What's happened? What's the and I had signed whatever. Like, I was just like, and I remember, and, you know, I love Pizo because he brought us into this. He was like, he made it real. Like, we're putting our thing on a tape, we do, but he would be, his first thing with me, after seeing me at the thing, being like, do you rap or whatever? And then I played him the thing we made. He was like, what color Benz you gonna get? You know, that's what the discussion was while we're like in, you know, his aunt's backyard or something like that, right? You know. Yeah. But that was, and then so then from there we decided to put out an EP. And my father heard that, and you know, I was able to use that to convince him to like invest a couple $1,000s, and we went to the studio. We had looked up on Digital Underground's thing, like, where did they go to the studio? And they went to Hyde Street Studios. So we called up Hyde Street Studios, and what engineer did they use? Matt Kelly. So we was like, we want Matt Kelly, and we didn't know what we were doing. I didn't know music, really. I would be like, okay, I want to remake this, you know, I'd have my own records and be like, I want to remake this sample. I want to do that with a guitar. And I'd be like, that's a piano, you know? So, like, I learned from, like, listening. Like, again, this is, like, shortly after, like, okay, I'm the producer because I can't rely on other people to do it, right? And maybe if I was a better organizer, I could. But at the time, I'm just like going from what could happen, and so I'm learning as we're going. And yeah, we make this EP. Actually, it was this dude Bruce Layton.
Shout out to Bruce, it's my guy.
Okay, yeah. That was the first person that we used, and Matt Kelly helped mix some stuff, or whatever, and. Yeah. Was
Pam the Funkstress part of the group for this EP?
No, actually, at the time, it was my boy Rodney, DJ O, goes by DJ Squareopolis right now. And, you know, and we had that every group has that period where you're like trying to do shows, and you got to spend energy on it that you could be using to make money, things like that. And that's what happened with us is, you know, me and E-Roc were like fired up to do it. And he was like, I gotta go and make money. So we started doing that. And then later we ran into Pam. Pam was DJing at, there used to be, I don't even know if they still got the Dunphy Hotel in San Mateo, but they used to do these, the Bay Area used to be good for some hip hop conferences where you got to pay $40 to get in and listen to somebody tell you some advice that may be okay, but you could have just heard it through the grapevine better than what they tell you. Somebody there is telling you how to put the 3 songs on your demo and telling you that this is what they're not signing. And they were always wrong, right? But there were all these conferences, and then how they made their money was you could pay to perform at it. And they'd be like, it's going to be industry people there. Meanwhile, the industry people that they got there are like, you know, somebody that works in the mail room or somebody, maybe even somebody up higher, but they're not signing from that sort of thing. So you pay, you're like, okay, we're going to put our money together. We're paying $500 to perform at this thing. So at the time, Pam, we were there performing, and Pam was there performing with Funk Lab All Stars with C-Funk, who goes by Prozac now, and she was just raw, and that was actually earlier. So we had met her from there, and then we were like, okay, let's see if she's available, you know, because we didn't have a DJ anymore. And then shortly after that, we got signed.
Right. And that was to Wild Pitch?
To Wild Pitch Records. And really, we were like, whatever the first train coming is, we're on it. Because for me, I was just like trying to I had this idea of getting it out there. Like when we did the EP, one reason it seemed bigger than it was we just, I used what I learned from organizing, and it was just like, we just wheat pasted the whole Bay Area. If you were getting on the onto the bridge or going down what was then East 14th or any big thoroughfare in Oakland or San Francisco, you was going to see our black and white poster. And we just went out there and just wheat pasted all over the place, right? So when the Gavin convention happened, labels were like, who is this? And luckily, we were like number 3 at Leopold's at the time, which was a record store back then, because of all of that. And it just kind of coincide. I don't know if we would have kept number 3 for very long, but it just happened to be right then. And so then we had people calling us, like wanting to hear what we're talking about. And it just all lined up right there where I was just like, I need the quickest way to have an album out. And, and in this case, I signed a contract that wasn't the best contract that I could sign. But I also know some really talented people that from going to those conferences, they were like, they didn't sign the contract that they wanted, which is fine, but they also didn't put out their own music, right? And some people that I think would have changed the face of music, right?
Yeah.
And so I always looked at it like, okay, we didn't get the huge contract from those first couple albums, but I don't think I saw people get bigger contracts that also you don't know about to this day. So
yes, a means to an end, right?
Yeah.
I was curious about that because Kill My Landlord is the first album which collects some of the songs that were on that EP, right?
Yeah.
That is interesting to consider that was distributed and marketed by a major label because of the message, which is, you mentioned Public Enemy, and there's other groups, X-Clan and other politically messaging groups that have a strong political message, but and was this 93 or something like that?
93 when it came out, yes.
So for a major label to sign a group like that and put out a debut album like that, that's not what you would expect from like a mainstream label, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think what it was is a combination of, like, everybody thinks that they are not the system. We all think that we're just the exception. Like, it doesn't matter where we work, whatever, you think, oh, okay, I'm working in this thing, I'm not that. But everybody has this idea that the world should be different.
Yeah.
But that they just aren't able to do anything about it. So you got people like that in all over the place who like, oh, I'm glad I can work on something that I agree with. And so there's a combination of that, a combination of, and then the factor of people not thinking music will do anything anyway, right? So usually the thing that gets put up against any, against art with a left politic in it is saying, oh, it's not going to sell. Oh, it's not going to sell. So that's the only thing. Nobody's going to be like, we don't want to have this because we don't agree with it. Nobody because the thing they've been selling us is their supposedly free speech. So they won't say that. But what they'll say is it won't sell. Matter of fact, we were told that by KMEL so many times, even when we had the #1 requested song on the radio. When we had Fat Cats and Bigger Fish out on our second album, it had gotten was getting BET play, and people and at the time we had something called what was it called? The Box, which was, you could. So it's before the internet.
It's like a request
Yeah, you
line.
could call and it cost money to request. And so what we did was get a bunch of fake identities, say this now, and we got a lot of phone lines, and we requested our music video all over the country. And so it was like, wow. So all of a sudden, people are getting requests because people are like, I saw it. Then they're doing radio requests and stuff. And so at that same time, this girl that was trying to get hired with Wild Pitch Records, but they wouldn't hire her yet. She wanted to prove what she could do, even though we weren't on any of the because EMI was the distributor. We weren't on any of their lists saying like, play this record, please play this record. They weren't putting any money behind it. But Mona Lisa knew Big Boy. And he played it on whatever that is, Wild. There's Power.
K-Day?
No, Power
106.
Yeah, Power 106. He played it there, and then it just started getting all kind of requests. This is in LA. So it started blowing up in LA first. And so a combination of then that and the video, then people were calling up KMEL, like, play the thing. And somebody that worked at KMEL told me, hey, you're the number one requested song. So I call up whoever was the programmer at the time and say, what's up? Like, play the song. They're like, oh, we think that's your fans calling. I'm like, what? I mean, of course, whoever is requesting a song, they're a fan of that song. And they were like, we don't think it's legit. And it apparently kept going for a long time. So, but we didn't get play. We got some mixed show at the end of the night play. But as opposed to LA, we got like, in LA, when it came on the radio there, like it was to the point where I was like tired of it when I would go to LA. Like they're playing it every hour, on the hour, all that kind of stuff. And I was like, oh, how did that, But what that did was generate, just in the LA area, 5,000 sales a week. And other record label people would tell me, like, why is the EMI not looking at that? When, because a lot of people get radio play, but they don't get the reaction from that. And they said, when you have that combination, that means you could duplicate it in other markets and it could go platinum. And so I was like, okay, what? And immediately after that, EMI bought the album from whole, because it was 50-50 deal with Wild Pitch. They bought the whole album from Wild Pitch, and it was out of the blue. So we were like, oh, that means they see it as a hit and they want to, do something with it. But so we go to have a meeting. They're like, we're not working this record. After they just paid Wild Pitch a whole bunch of money for it. So anyway, that got me in a big depression because I'm like, damn, at this point, I'm 24. I'm like, okay, I took this side road to be an artist, to do this stuff. And then all of a sudden, I have this route to like have this record that's big and it could just get silenced, And I'm not going to, I could speculate. It could be all sorts of things. It could be politics. It could be they also were getting rid of breaking ties with Wild Pitch, and maybe some executive there didn't want Wild Pitch to leave with a hit, because then that would get somebody fired at EMI. It could be any of that stuff. But I was just like, damn, I'm putting all this work and I have no control over this, right? And they even called up people in LA and said, we're not working this record. This is not, let's be clear, this is not on our list, that sort of thing. So anyway, so at that point, I was like, I went through a 24-year-old midlife crisis. And I was like, damn, what have I been wasting my life being an artist? You know, what am I doing? So I quit doing music right then. And we made an organization called the Young Comrades.
You were also part of something called the Mau Mau Rhythm Collective. Was that before this?
That was before. Mau Mau Rhythm Collective was before this. So Mau Mau Rhythm Collective was something that so when I went into music, there was a bunch of other people who had also kind of come from organizing to do stuff. One of them was my boy Osaji Fo. And then we had other folks like my boy Dave, who called himself Point Blank Range. We had this thing called the Mau Mau Rhythm Collective. So the idea was that at first we were like, we're just going to be a cultural organization. We're just a cultural organization that just talks about politics. So we would do these, we would be doing these shows. Like, and part of it was us being like, well, we can't get booked on shows because people would be like, oh, that's what are y'all talking? You're not talking the gangster shit. So we was like, okay, we got to make our own shows. And so we had these things called hip hop edutainment concerts, taking the edutainment title from KRS-One. And so we throw these things and it would always be, packed, like somewhere between 800 and 1,000 people maybe showing up at the shows. And people would join the organization. And it was real loose because a bunch of us had kind of come from organizing and we were like, oh, no, this is just cultural, whatever. But then people were joining and we'd have these big meetings and people were like, well, what are we doing? Like, we're just doing music? How are we just doing music, right? And so people would, so I remember, and one of the people that was leading it was this girl, Nico Slater. Her father had been a Panther, and a bunch of the old Black Panthers had come to us and been like, heard the name and was like, can our kids join your organization or whatever? So we had all of this stuff going on, and people were like, oh, how do we, how are we, that's backsliding to just do music and not do anything else. So we started making our shows always be intertwined with a campaign and an organization that was doing. So, for instance, at the time, a big thing that was happening was that specifically Black women were getting sent to prison for what they called welfare fraud. And so we were working with this group called Women's Economic Agenda Project. And what we would do is say, okay, because, you start throwing shows, all of a sudden you got 50 people that want to perform. So we'd be like, okay, we can have 20 people perform, but everybody gets to do one song and you got to write a song about this. Mm. And so everybody's songs would be about that thing that day. And we had people that were known, later on known, being part of it, right? And so, that was one. Then we had another one, police brutality. Then we had another one around housing, things like that, right? And so we were doing that sort of thing. And that was something that we were doing as we were working stuff. And then what the reality of what happened is once I was promoting the Coup and going out and touring and stuff like that, then I wasn't paying as much attention to the organization. It was kind of all left on Nico Slater's shoulders. Nico went, because she was at Fremont High School, and she ended up going to FAMU, and I ended up getting calls from these dudes because they were starting their version of the Mau Mau Rhythm Collective. From her being at FAMU, turned out to be Dead Prez, right? And so that, those are like all those connections right there. And so really, and that was like something where I was like, okay, I'm like, I was an integral part of this organization, and now I'm backing up to do tours and remixes and all that, and it kind of left that organization by the wayside and dwindled.
Got it. And then so
then we had young comrades, which ended up turning out that everybody involved was also doing music from before that, but it just that's what ended up happening. And there were a lot of people, some that had gone to San Francisco State, some that had been in All African People's Revolutionary Party, which was Kwame Ture's organization, but kind of had left that. And some who had been in the African People's Socialist Party, which is Uhuru, known as Uhuru sometimes. And then all sorts of folks. And we were doing these campaigns. And while I did that, once my publishing money started running out, then I was like, okay, I got to get a job. I didn't have kids at the time, so I didn't need that much money. But I knew I was good at sales, because that's another side of the story, is like I was always the kid. Why I ended up being good at some of the organizing is I was always the kid who they came up and picked up in a van when you're 11, and you go door to door, knocking on doors, selling subscriptions to newspapers and crying and saying you need one more sold so you could go to Disneyland, that sort of thing. So then when I went to San Francisco State, I also was doing telemarketing for selling the Chronicle. And then so during this time, I knew that I was good. I could just work one day a week and have the money that I need. That was the scary, how scary that was. Is, and so, so that was during the time with the telemarketing. I was like, oh, this could be a movie, that sort of thing.
Right.
And the part that I skipped is while I was at UPS, that was actually a backtrack from I had gone to school at San Francisco State, and then me and this other dude, Brian Bernard, started throwing these parties. We called ourselves Two Smooth Brothers Productions. So this is at the same time I'm like doing organized. So there's all sorts of contradictions going on, right? So, we throw this part, my girl Valisa her father had a speakeasy under the house in West Oakland. So we started throwing parties over there, called ourselves Two Smooth Brothers Production with a V in it. And all of a sudden we're making money, right? Then we go and we rent this place on Webster behind the California Ballroom. It was called the Uptown at the time, because I used to play drums. I used to drum under this dude named Friday. And that's where we did had the dance classes. So I asked these dudes, like, can we rent it on Wednesdays? You're not doing nothing on Wednesdays. Let us have Wednesdays for the summer. And I was like, you keep the bar. It was only beer and wine. You keep the bar. I'm not even 21 yet. So, you keep the bar. We just take the door. And we thought we were rich, right? Because it was like, I don't know, like we were each making $1,000 a week, something like that. So we're like calculating all this sort of stuff. Of course, fight broke out, and all of that pretty much ended. But I was doing these parties, and I had stopped going to school because we were doing these parties, and we were just like, oh, we could make this happen. And once that's when at the same time, like I said, I'm going to Double Rock doing these things. There's, you never have one straight pathway, right? And so that also started like being like, what am I doing with this? What, all that sort of stuff. And so a lot of people that know me in Oakland, they know me from many different lives, right? From whether it's from high school, whether it's from organizing, whether it's from running track, whether it's from, doing music, throwing parties, all these things, right? And we ended up having this thing called the Underground Cafe, where we rented out what was called Concepts Cultural Gallery at the time, but people didn't know what it was. And the trick was, we made our own sign. It was like a legit sign made out of wood. And it said the Underground Cafe. And we only had Fridays with them. Fridays was big. And people thought it was a club called that. They didn't think like we rented out the place so they were like, oh, y'all got a club. And we thought we found a loophole in the law, right? Because we're like, well, we don't have a liquor license, but we could get a wedding caterer that has a liquor license. We could put up this sign, Underground Cafe, and we could get a wedding caterer to come in there. And I'm sure the wedding caterer knew what was going on, because he was like, you know, because he came one night and saw the crowd was mainly 19 years old, right? And he was like, okay, I'm only making Long Island iced teas, though. So yeah, we got raided one time. But yeah, that was that.
Man, the man of many hats, many different lives lived, bro. Crazy. I wanted to ask you specifically something, a really interesting point in Bay Area rap trivia is when E-40 sampled your lyric on Practice Looking Hard. Mm-hmm. And you and Tupac appear in the music video for the song. It's like one of my favorite pictures is the three of y'all. Just feels like it just symbolizes all the diversity and the different styles and the unity that the Bay had at the time. What was that day like?
Man, it was just like a long video day. Meet in the morning, end up leaving it pretty late at night. You know, what I remember is Tupac was always like, man, we wasting time. We should be going in the studio while we setting up, you know? So he was always like, you know, just on it, ready to be recording.
Did you have a relationship with Tupac?
Not really. You know, it was you know, I think we like knew some of the same girls, things like that. He'd be like, you know, and some, you know, sometimes with that sort of stuff, it gets where you don't know what's real and what's not. Like somebody being like, oh yeah, you know, I played your stuff for Tupac. He said it was unprofessional. And really it was. But of course, you know, you like, damn. You know, and he had a song out all at the time too. So then later on, and you know, Pam had known Tupac pretty well. Matter of fact, where I met Pam was at Tupac's album release party, right?
For Tupacalypse Now?
Yeah. No, what was the first one? Was that that was Tupacalypse Now? Okay. Yeah. And yeah, so I met Pam was DJing at his record release party. And yeah, so then we would see him, once we started going to LA, we would see him at all the parties in LA. And I think he kind of still trying to triangulate us what it was about. And then one day when we saw him in New York, that's when he started showing a whole lot of love. He's like, oh, I'm so happy to see y'all out here. This and that, you know. It's like, come up on stage with me. Do this, blah, 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 this and that, you know. And so then, you know, we would just see each other and he would show a lot of love all the time. And then, yeah, then we had the music video.
Dope. I've talked about this concept of like kind of like a split in the Bay Area of styles. Talked about this with Souls of Mischief, with Sunspot Jones from Mystic Journeyman, that the Bay Area is primarily, I guess most people would probably associate it with like mob music, what you could call gangster rap. But there's also, and plenty of the people who make that music love classic hip hop shit, break beats and samples and what they call backpack rap, even though most people don't like that term. I feel like for you and the Coup, you've been able to kind of blend in both worlds a little easier than some of these other acts. On the way over here, I was doing some research. I saw like you did an appearance on Ant Banks' album. Even the fact that you appeared in that video that 40 sampled you. Do you agree that there is a split in styles? And if so, like how have you been able to navigate that?
I don't know. There's a lot of different styles. Like, I couldn't say Too Short is the same style as Mac Dre, but people might be like, that's part of the split on one side.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of ways to, and I wouldn't say that, we're anywhere near the same as Hyro or anything like that. So I think calling it a split is actually not really looking at all of the diversity of styles that are there, right? I mean, and I think with us, one of the things that made the Coup liked in a lot of different circles just has to do with the reason we were doing what we're doing, right? So I never was like, no, now don't get me wrong, I have an artistic ego. Like I want people to, I know that for people to listen to what I'm saying, they got to think I'm raw.
Yeah.
But I'm not talking about that I'm raw, right? None of my lyrics are like that. I don't think, maybe I'm wrong, but so what people were drawn to was the fact that we're talking about the same stuff, the quote unquote real shit, right? We're talking about the same struggles that a lot of people might be talking about. And I might have just a couple other layers of analysis on it. And I never was like talking down to people like, oh, you need to know this and you need to know that. Because that's not my whole point. Coming from being an organizer, I always knew that people pretty much already agree with the things that I agree with. They might not use the same words. And so the point is that I want to talk about what we agree on. And so it was always like that. And I think there was also maybe something in the kind of music that we like.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think our first album was really slow, right? It was really slow. It was all about trying to have the 808s. I didn't know how to do the 808s right. That's one thing. But that was the intention. Because I always had it was before I knew about what they called it, the when the envelope triggers the bass so that you could get more 808, and I didn't know about all that. But because I would always be trying to have the low bass line, doo-doo-doom, doom-doom, doom, doo-doo-doom, doom, doom, but try to have that 808 kick all the time, and I didn't know how to tune the shit. And it would but that was the point, is it had a rumble to it at least, right? And it was about that. And I was trying to get to the most people, right? So the most people that I knew who were around me, who listened, so I'm thinking about that. And I think that has a little bit to do with just who I was around, all those things, the fact that, I was going to parties and listening to parties and, so listening to things at parties. So I, my tastes weren't like, I had some friends that were very much into like Cool G rap or things like that. And I knew it, but I wasn't, that was very much in this smaller circle of things, right? But I also wanted to impress those friends too. So I had this sort of these hoops I had to go through, which was do something. And let's say this, I think, and I always forget to say this, but one of my biggest influences was Ice Cube, right? So, that's like a different thing. But the difference is all the people I love, I didn't have the skill to imitate them. so it came out as this, newer weird thing, right? Like I'd be playing my demo tapes to friends and be like, man, does it sound like Ice Cube? They'd be like, hell no. It doesn't sound. And then there'll be people that came out, that had records out, some people that were really good for otherwise, and they could sound exactly like Ice Cube. And I'd be like, God damn it.
Yeah.
How do they do that? And luckily I couldn't. So I think the difference is like how Ice Cube at the time was respected by quote unquote lyricists and by everybody else. That's kind of what I was going for. And so it never, it's just aesthetically, I always had like the funk or blues aesthetic, usually. And that was until later. But later on, I also kept developing. I think at first I had a certain idea of the music I was making, and then I got more free as we developed.
Yeah, I think you can hear that in the music. What brought you back to do that second album, Genocide and Juice? Because you mentioned you quit.
I quit after Genocide and Juice because that was Fat Cats. Yeah. And so what brought me back to do Steal This album?
Well, sorry, can I ask another question about the album? Because that's also when E-Roc left too.
Yeah, E-Roc left after that. And part of it was I was taking too long to get to doing the third album. But because I was like going through that crisis and wanting to do organizing and he got a job doing Longshoreman. Longshoreman, you get your A card, and you're making, I don't know, now it must be $120 a year or something like that. 4 hours a day. So he got that. He had kids before I did too. And so he had got that job. And then when it was like, let's do an album, he was like, I'm not leaving this,
Yeah.
So.
Interesting. On that album is one of my favorite songs of yours, Santa Rita Weekend, which kind of like, I was talking about how you were able to kind of go with the diversity of the Bay, because that song has 40 and Spice One.
Yeah.
And it's a song about spending the weekend in jail, which is like a gangster rap, quote unquote, subject matter. But y'all break it down with like...
I'm not a gangster and I've been to Santa Rita.
I was going to ask, was that based on the actual weekend?
It wasn't based on that, but when I went to jail that time, and I remember somebody, I don't know if it's a regular saying, but, somebody saying it like it was a vacation, like Santa Rita Weekend.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay, that's
it reminds you of getting booked on a Friday.
Yeah.
Because all the courts are closed. So if you get booked on a Friday, you're staying there till Monday.
Yeah, that's when that happened. Yeah.
Well, you're able to like make it a song about like prison overcrowding and like racism in the justice system, but it just, I don't know, it's just, I like how y'all did that, where it doesn't, you're not preaching with the music, you're not hitting people over the head with the subject matter. You got 40 and Spice on there.
Yeah, that's one where I feel like I didn't, I have verses that I'm very proud of, and sometimes you just come with it. That was an album where I had a bunch of songs that I was proud of, and we had a couple days to put forth the last couple songs. And then I got a song with Spice One and E40, and I don't have a verse. And I'm writing my verse right then. And that, I don't listen to that song that much because I know I could have came way harder. And I have before and after in my career, and I just like, damn.
No, I feel it. E-Roc was busting on that album.
Yeah.
There's a couple good dope joints on there. But okay, so Steal This album is when you came back to doing music.
Yeah.
And what brought that on?
Well, one thing I want to say about Santa Rita Weekend, that's R2D2 in there. That's going.
Oh, you sampled R2D2.
Yeah.
Oh, that's dope. That's crazy.
Another thing about that album. So, right after Kill My Landlord, my girl Timbisa Mshaka she had been working for the Gavin Report, and she had I don't know, somehow she was connected to TVT Records, and she brought the president of TVT Records over to my house, and he was like, "Well, we got this Gil Scott-Heron album," and he did all the, he recorded it already, but he wants to come with a new take on the music and stuff. So could you make some music for it? And Gil Scott-Heron is one of my heroes. So I was like, okay, cool. So I made the music. And at the time he was living in San Francisco, and made the music, waited, made the music probably in a month or two or something like that. Went and waited for him in the studio. He didn't show up. Went back. He didn't show up again. Went back. Third day, then I get a call saying, "Oh, they found him. He's in London," because he was tweaking or something like that. And he's not. We're gonna just go with the old version. So I had this album worth of music that became Genocide and Juice.
Damn.
Yeah.
That was originally meant for Gil Scott-Heron.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I could see, like you mentioned, you're getting kind of burnt with the whole music shit. You're going through label drama, and still this album comes out on an independent label.
Yeah. So okay, with that, I had gone, once we were organized, we were doing these campaigns. Like we had a campaign against the 3 strikes law. And what at the time, and so we wanted to do a jury nullification campaign. And at the time, in order to get on the jury, you had to be registered to vote. And we weren't promoting voting, but we were like, we went up and set up a bunch of booths all over the place. Register to vote so you can get on a jury and vote not guilty on any 3 strikes case. And we had that on the sign. And we had thousands of people sign up, basically. And it ended up getting some pushback. We had meetings, and some people were like, okay, I don't want to do this if it's somebody for, child molesting, whatever, that sort of a thing. And so we're like, okay, excuse yourself if it's something that you can't do, So we had these thousands of signatures saying, I am going to as long as there is a 3 strikes law, I'm going to purposely get on a jury and vote not guilty on any 3 strikes case.
Mm.
And it said, in certain cases, like because there were different community groups that wanted to be able to say, I'm not, these kind of cases, I'm going to excuse myself. But, so we were doing stuff like that. And we were doing some anti-police brutality things. And what I learned during that time, I've been, before that, like I said, been like, why the fuck am I doing this music and spending my life being an artist? And what I learned was, like, a lot of times we're trying to get people involved in campaigns, and their thought processes sometimes had to do with direct quotes from songs, and things that they would relate to different things. And I was like, then I started getting a new respect for the music that I was doing, and realized like what I had let go. So then, I hadn't been doing music. We had done this one song. We were going to do a deal with Geffen, and we had done the one song that ended up on Steal This Album, which is the one song with E-Roc on it, which was Breathing Apparatus. And so we had that song, but I hadn't made any other ones. And just kind of sitting there, and Joe and Chris, who have been part of In a Minute and done all these things, they had made their own label called
Dogday.
Dogday, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they were like, come work with us. It'll be a 50-50 deal. And so we did that.
So they also had 11.5 Darkroom Familia, who I believe you collaborated with.
Yeah. And that Darkroom Familia collaboration was pretty crazy because it was just, I was at, they had a warehouse, Joe and Chris in like Berkeley, and Darkroom Familia were there. And they were like, hey man, we should do a song together. And I was like, yeah, cool. They're like, cool. And they pulled out of a bag, they had a 8-track cassette thing. And they, in the hallway, were like, cool, here's the beat. 8-track cassette studio, basically, right there. And I was like, oh, and they were like, just whatever you got in the next 15 minutes. So I wrote it like thinking, okay, it's like this is something never gonna come out, right?
Right.
And so I just said what I said, and it was like free because I didn't think, whatever, nobody's gonna hear this. Like if this is how they're running it, I didn't know who they were. And then like that night I get a knock on my door and it's them. They're like, now we're gonna shoot the video. And that's why I got because I was writing an album at the time, and I always used to like just let my facial hair grow until I finished the album or whatever. And so yeah, we just got on a BART and we did the video in 20 minutes or something like that.
I ain't gonna lie, it looks like it.
Yeah.
Because I just recently discovered that. I was like, Darkroom Familia and Boots Riley? Like, and I checked it out, I'm like, this is pretty dope. But it does got that kind of like quick feel to it, but they got a movement.
Yeah, well, and at the time, really, and for movies, they definitely are
right.
very inspiring because they had a business model.
Right.
They would, and because it's before the internet, really, they would sell. They did so much mail order, right? Mm-hmm. So, and that's also what Joe and Chris were good at, was mail order. I think maybe picking that up from In a Minute or whatever. But so they would make a movie for $5,000. This was their thing. They make a movie for $5,000, and for $5,000, they spend $1,000 getting like somebody like Jesse Borrego to come up for half a day.
Yeah.
But in that half a day, they got all these rooms. They're shooting a whole bunch of scenes, right? And putting it, they're shooting it quick. It's boom, boom, boom. And then, and each time they would sell 5,000 copies for $20 a pop to their fans in like Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, California. And they would do 2 of those a year.
Yeah.
And then they have a soundtrack with it.
Mm-hmm.
So
them dudes got hundreds of releases, movies, CDs, all in their catalog. It's impressive from an independent music standpoint.
Yeah. So yeah, that was. But just their idea, and it was really the Quiros brothers who were directing the movie, and just their idea of like, oh, we just do it.
Just hop on board.
And with the films too. But yeah, so I'm sorry, yeah.
No, it's all good. Didn't Dogday ended up doing shady business? I don't want to put that out there if that's not true.
I don't know the details of that.
Okay.
So
your dealings were straight.
Well, I can't say that I know what they were doing business wise. I know that they ended up getting a lot on their plate.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like all of a sudden they got 30 albums coming out at once. And so when that happens, money is getting stretched all over the place. So that's all I know.
I always heard rumors like they skipped town and owed hella people money.
Oh, I'm not saying it's not true. I just don't know I don't know anything about how that, because we did that album with them, and then the first .com boom happened. And so I had just done that one-off deal with them, and the first .com boom happened, and this label, which was, this internet company was like, we want to do a rap label. I was like, I don't think you know what you're doing. Like, what, and then they were like in negotiation with my manager. I was like, what is this? This is like, not gonna, And then what happened is, okay, by this time we had gotten kicked out of our place and we were living in Richmond, right? And I wanted to be back in Oakland. And my wife at the time was a teacher. And my friend told me about this lottery program that was the Teacher Next Door program. And because they had the police next door and they had the Teacher Next Door program. It was through HUD. So with the Teacher Next Door program, if you win the lottery thing, then you can buy an already really reduced price HUD home for half of that price. So it was like, so I went on there, I entered my wife's social security number in there, just went boom, boom, boom. Next day, get a call, right? And they're like, yeah, if you can get a loan secured, you can get this house. And it was only like for $50,000, right? And I was like, I don't have that. So I went to try to get a loan. $50,000, think that's not that much. But I had negative credit, right? And they were like just laughing at me. And I was like, damn, well, like we're gonna pass up. And it was a house on 80th, right? And 80th and Rudsdale, but it was a house. And so and this is from, at the time, we were like really we had a place, but it was like not necessarily going to be there, right? And this was at a time, you think things are bad now. They were definitely bad then. Like to get a place, people were showing up in their work uniform and all that kind of stuff, right? And so I'm sitting here saying I'm a rapper, right? So I'm not getting a place, right? So this was my chance. And the HUD people said, well, if you can have $50,000 in the bank tomorrow, then you could get the house. So I did this internet record label. I was like, okay, we can stop negotiating right now. I need cash right now. And they said, well, we can't give you cash, but we can, we can write a check and you could go cash it at our bank, Silicon Valley Bank, right? So I'm like, okay, this is what I got to do. So I get the check. I drive down to Silicon Valley Bank. Now I was driving, I think it was like a Datsun 626, right? The hatchback. And it was like, and so I go down to Silicon Valley Bank, and they're supposed to give me $50,000 in cash, right? And I had them call and all that kind of stuff because I was like, no, somebody's not going to cash this, right? And they were like, we don't have any more large bills. And I'm like, well, I got to have this money because my bank was Bank of America in Richmond, right? And so I had to get it into my bank. And so they're giving me 20s, and so I walk out of this bank with duffel bags, right? And I'm thinking anybody in the bank could just call their friend, anything. Like, so and I had never seen that much money. I had been a bank teller, so I saw that much money one time sitting. I saw $1 million one time sitting, and I was like, okay, what should I do? But but this is the second time I saw a bunch of money. So, I'm not in those circles, right? So I'm walking out with duffel bags because it's 20s and 10s and shit, right? And I'm getting in this car that's about to break down. All the whole way I'm thinking like, anybody at the bank could have just called somebody, So then I get to Bank of America in Richmond. off McDonald. And I'm loading it onto the desk, just all this stack of money. And the manager's like, we can't take that. Like, what are you talking about? They're like, we don't know where this money came from. Like, you don't need to know where it came from. Right. And they're like, it could be dope money. I was like, it could be. But that's not your job. Right. I was like, you got to report this to the IRS, but that's it. They're like, we're not taking it. And, you know, it's a crowd of people in the bank at the time. And they're like, and everybody's looking. I'm like, you know, I'm not taking this money back outside after, you know, so I had to get that in there. Anyway, that's the story. So I ended up being on this record label, 75 Arc, right? And it was Dan the Automator was running it, you know. So, and I got a house out the deal. Right? Damn.
And that was for the next album?
That was for Party Music.
Very controversial album.
Yeah.
Wow. All right, listen. I really wanted to ask you about this. Let's break this down for those who don't know.
Well, what I also got out of that deal was that was my, before that I had been all about analog. I didn't like the ADATs or any of that stuff. You know, and I didn't like Pro Tools either. Right. But then, you know, at the time they were like, well, you could get this whole Pro Tools setup and, you know, then, you know, it's not going to be analog, but you look at all this stuff you could do. So I had a house and I had a studio. Right. So I was like,
it's pretty good.
Okay, I could do whatever.
It's a good setup right there. Yeah. Hell yeah. Well, Party Music was scheduled to come out in 2001, which it did end up coming out in 2001. The original cover depicts you and Pam in front of the World Trade Center with you holding a bass tuner, I believe, or a guitar tuner, kind of mimicking a detonator. And behind you, there's an explosion in the Twin Towers. This was submitted for artwork. Your album came out just a few days after 9/11.
What we had was not a detonator, it was a bass tuner.
It was a bass tuner, but it was kind of mimicking, like you press the tuner, and that is symbolizing your music destroying capitalism. Yep. And that artwork was already submitted, shot, everything
that was May or June 2001 is when we shot it. And then, and it was out in magazines in August.
That is crazy coincidence. I mean, it wasn't the first time that the towers had been attacked, right? Was that kind of your thinking too, like the previous attack, or was it just literally using that as a symbol?
Yeah. It was more that I wanted to talk about, say that our music was destroying capitalism. And so we had gone, looked over like, oh, maybe we could have a MPC, which I didn't really use. So I thought, no, but we could have a drum machine blowing up the White House. And I was like, everybody's blowing up the White House. That's cliche. And also, that's not where the seat of power is, right? That's not where I think the seat of power is. So I was like, okay, let's do something where it's blowing up Wall Street. And so we literally went over to Wall Street, and I was like, you know what? Most people are not going to know what this is when we look at it. You know, like it just looks like some buildings, this or that. And so then we were like, oh, World Trade Center. People know that, and it says World Trade in the name, and people know what that is. So, yeah, we the idea was just that, was trying to talk about music, just our music being aimed at creating a movement to destroy capitalism.
So when September 11th happened, I mean, obviously that was a moment of shock for everybody. But like, you must have been like, oh shit, because the album was already like scheduled to drop. Mm-hmm. People are like, the country's in like a sense of disbelief, mourning,
it's funny
anger.
Because when I first heard about it, it was just on the radio. So I was like, I knew it was, but I didn't think about visually it seeming the same. Because they were like a plane running. You know, I didn't think of anything visual. And only later that day did I realize what.
Like, oh, shit.
We're
going to make some many connections about this album. And that did, you had to like replace the artwork and push the album
we ended up replacing it. And because immediately, like, before I even knew that it looked alike, like, distributors were calling and saying, we're not carrying this and that. So we replaced it with an album cover that was supposed to be like a cocktail glass, but making it like it's a Molotov cocktail with gasoline, you know? And And luckily, you know, it's the kind of situation I had been preparing for all of my career, which was to be able to talk about basically how the world works. And you know, so in reality, the album cover is not what caused the controversy. Now it's looked back as that's what caused the controversy. What caused the controversy is later that fall we were doing a tour, and I put out a press release that said, and my publicist wouldn't do it. They were like, no, we're not doing it. So I had to get actually Jeff Chang put it out for me, and I did a press release that said, you know, that what happened on September 11th was an atrocity, but that it was very small in comparison to what the U.S. had just been found guilty of, which was the year before been found guilty by the World Court of helping to orchestrate the killing of 30,000 people in Central America, and to which they thumbed their nose at the World Court. And I said that, and I said, due to these circumstances, because at the time they were trying to get everybody to wave flags and all that kind of stuff. So I said, due to these circumstances, on the upcoming tour by the Coup, we will not let anyone into our concert wearing the combination of colors red, white, and blue.
Wow.
And so then all these news outlets wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, I saw the clip of you on Bill Maher. I'm not a big fan of Bill Maher.
Oh, yeah. No. He's undercover, right-wing, racist.
Hello. I admired how you held your ground. It was basically you and four white folks, and they did not seem like they were trying to understand or even allow you to speak your position. It was kind of it felt more like an interrogation than it did a conversation.
Yeah.
But one thing that was really interesting and what I caught in the clip is that Bill Maher kind of, the other guy, I don't remember who they were. It was like a comedian and a film director and somebody else, but they were kind of grilling you about your communist beliefs and basically trying to call you a hypocrite in so many words for you be selling anything, which is kind of a crazy, there's such a thing as commerce.
Well, yeah, the thing is that we live in a system where that's how things get out. I mean,
right.
I mean, Karl Marx sold books, right? And that's how the word got out. And even when he didn't sell it, other people sold it, right? You know, if you work at a factory and you get on top of the machine to say to people, you know, let's take this shit over, you're not being a hypocrite because you work there, first of all, and because you get on top of the machine.
Yeah, I've had to come to terms with this too. Like I said earlier, my experience with community, money makes some people uncomfortable, which I understand. It's, in some ways, you could say it's a necessary evil. At the end of the day, this is a system that's forced on us to use capital that's provided for us. This is what we're born into. I believe it's what we make of it and what we do with our time and resources and energy and our intentions behind that, that you can still have your beliefs and still exist in this world where the capital is necessary means to an end, but it's not how you define yourself or live your life or there's a difference between utilizing the dollar and worshiping the dollar.
Well, what I would also say is that the ultimate thing, one of the things that I would want to see is a world that we create in which the people democratically control the wealth that we create with our labor. Now, that would be communism. But in order to get there, in order to change things a little or a lot, and even to get there, we need to have a mass, militant, radical labor movement. And in order to get to doing that, and that's something that can put a whole, a stop to parts of industry and get things going. So therefore, what I'm doing is not just trying to stop participating in this system. What I'm trying to do is get people to overthrow the system. And that's two different things. And because you can't stop participating in this system, there's no way to do that. So there's this idea of people being like, oh, I'm just using certain kinds of corporations. I'm just doing this. It really is a way for people to not actually engage in figuring out how to build movements.
When you say use certain type of corporations, you mean like
I'm doing only ethical,
clean energy,
that sort of thing. And not even just, and that's, it's great that those companies are like that.
Yeah.
But if you can't change the way business is going through the whole system, you're not going to change that just because you buy from this company. The vote with your dollar thing is something that has come up in opposition to the idea of class struggle, of labor movements that can shut things down at the source of power.
Well, I think also what I took from that, the debate on Bill Maher, if you want to call it that, besides some of those points you're making, is the fact that the media, certain people in media, their job is to shut down the other side of the conversation, as opposed to just nobody on that panel seemed like they really wanted to hear you out. And
what was funny is the comedian dude.
Harlan Williams.
Yeah, he during the commercial he was like, "Man, I really agree with everything you're saying. They just told me I'm supposed to do this. I'm supposed to be the funny one and make fun of you to keep it light so people will watch more."
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think that's wow. I don't believe it. I don't believe anything I see on TV, bro. So that doesn't surprise me.
No, what's crazy is that, and what I think what got them weird, because I didn't, how some of those shows are done, is they basically shape the show. Like the producer will come and say, okay, this is what we're talking about. If so-and-so says this, what are you going to say? If so-and-so says that, what are you going to say? They go through all of these things and they kind of construct a show. In there. And so I don't remember where it was, but there was a time when I realized something different about the question they were asking, and I said something different, and then it kind of threw everything off.
Nice.
But yeah.
Yeah, I looked uncomfortable, but salute to you for standing your ground there. Boots, man, I could talk to you for 2 more hours, bro. Okay. I feel like we're only scratching the surface here.
Yeah, what I want people to know, because a lot of people don't know, some people know about movie, Sorry to Bother You.
Yeah, I wanted to get into that.
But a lot of people don't know about my TV show that's on Prime Video called I'm a Virgo. It's about a 13-foot tall black man who lives in Oakland. It's with Jarrell Jerome. So check that out. And if you haven't seen Sorry to Bother You with Keith Stanfield, Tessa Thompson, Terry Crews, Omari Hardwick, all these folks, check that out.
Amazing film, man. I enjoyed watching it. I just started checking out this series. So far, so good. You wrote and directed most of the episodes. You wrote all that. You directed all the episodes.
Directed all the episodes. Wrote most of it. Yeah, I've written the story beats out, and then wrote a lot of that. Is
film like your new artistic direction that we can expect?
Yeah, that's the main thing because when I went to San Francisco State, I was doing film, film and history, and and so when I took the deal to do the Coup's first album, part of how I made sense of it was like, I can make people watch my movies in their head.
Yeah.
So
another thing I didn't get to ask about was Me and Jesus to Pimp, which is a visual song, and the music video with Roger Guinevere Smith.
Yeah.
Amazing actor. Also is like perfect move. Did you direct that video?
Co-directed it, yeah.
So I can see where you kind of have your roots in this this medium.
Yeah. No, that was a crazy video because he's a method actor and
he's a method actor, so he's staying in character.
He's staying in character, and we're getting out of places like place that was called the Serenader back in the day, and people are getting out. Oh, wasn't you in deep cover? Like, bitch, if you don't get your, he's getting in fights and shit just to stay in character, and I had to protect him. It's just going crazy.
Wow. Yeah, he was pretty convincing in that role. I wanted.
And then what people don't know is he used to be in a rap group with Ice-T.
I did not know that.
Yeah. His name was Holly Watts.
What?
And matter of fact, when I ran into Ice-T after that, I was like, I just did some stuff with your boy Roger Guinevere Smith. He's like, Ice-T was like, that motherfucker's crazy. I can't be around him. He gets you in trouble.
I always enjoyed his performances, man. Smiley and do the right thing, man.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to have you back, bro, because I feel like we could talk about the timeline, but we could also talk about some of these ideas and these concepts. Right. And I hope they've inspired some viewers. I hope people go check out I'm a Virgo.
Yep.
If you ever need support of this platform, we're happy to offer it to you, bro.
All right.
And thanks again.
Cool.
Man.
Thank you.
And thank you, listeners. This is Dregs One, History of the Bay. Thanks to the team, everybody supporting. We're not going to stop to the end. Shout out to Bruce Riley and the Coup. And we out of here, y'all. Peace.
All right.
Recognize where you got the game. We got our own style, got our own slang. Northern California is a West Coast thing. This is the history of the Bay. Recognize where you got the game. We got our own style, got our own slang. Northern California is a West Coast thing. This is the history of the Bay.